First, we're going to review flexion and extension of the shoulder. So today we're starting with the patient laying in a supine position. You want to make sure they're comfortable and that you are fully supporting the joint. So what I'm going to do is put one arm below or above the elbow, and the other arm I'm going to be supporting her wrist and her hand. So just stretching her through that range. Nice, slow and controlled movements, and making sure that you're moving to the point of tension and not extreme pain. If we were to do this in a gravity eliminated position, I would actually have the patient roll over to her side, and then flexion extension can be done without gravity affecting it significantly. And then to measure flexion extension, you can measure flexion in a supine position. You can also measure shoulder extension if the patient rolled over into a prone position. But for today, I'm going to have Amber come up to a sitting position. The axis of the goniometer is going to be at the lateral aspect of the humeral head, so you can palpate it and feel the bump there. So the axis is there. One arm is going to be in line with her trunk, and the other arm is going to follow her humerus. So there she goes, up into extension, and down, and then we can also do the same thing. It's in line with the trunk and her humerus, and that measures her extension.
Okay, so next we're going to do abduction. So to move Rochelle's arm passively through abduction, I'm going to support her above the elbow, and with her palm facing up, I'm just going to move her slowly through abduction and adduction. To measure in a supine position, I want the stationary arm to be lined up parallel with her sternum, and the axis is going to be right above the humeral head. And then the moving arm is going to follow her humerus as she moves. So that's how you would measure that way. If she were to be sitting up at the edge of the bed, we would line the stationary arm up with her body, and the axis is going to be over the acromion process on the posterior aspect of her shoulder. And as she comes into abduction, the moving arm is going to follow.
We're going to review the shoulder range of motion for horizontal abduction and horizontal adduction. It is best for horizontal adduction if the patient is lying in supine. So you support above and below, support the arm, and you cross it over her body into horizontal adduction. And then it can only come back to neutral, so we couldn't really get much abduction there. So it's easiest to measure if you bring the patient up to a sitting position. The axis of the goniometer is going to be on top of the acromion process, and this is neutral, so the stationary arm is going to stay in this position. The moving arm is going to then follow the line of the humerus into horizontal adduction, and then if we start back in neutral again, the patient's going to move her arm, and the stationary arm is going to follow, or the moving arm will follow the humerus into horizontal abduction.
Okay, so next we're going to review internal and external rotation of the shoulder. So to move Rochelle passively through internal and external rotation, there are two ways to do this. The first would be to abduct her shoulder and move into external and internal rotation that way. Or we can bring her elbow down by her side and cross over her body and out that way. And to measure this in a supine position, we're going to do the first method. So the stationary arm is going to line up with her arm, and as she moves into external rotation, the moving arm is going to follow along, and same for internal. And our axis is lined up with the olecranon process of the elbow. And then if Rochelle were to sit at the edge of the bed, we could do the same thing. So the stationary arm, again with the axis on the olecranon process, is going to stay in line with her arm, and it's going to be parallel to the floor. And as she moves into external rotation, we're going to follow along. and then for internal. And if she weren't able to abduct her shoulder, we would do it underneath. So again, the axis is in the same place. The stationary arm stays here, and as she moves into external rotation, the moving arm follows. And again for internal.